Taban, first of all, thank you so much for talking to me. I really appreciate the time that you've set aside to do this. I want to start with this. Your book is about journeys. It's about a physical journey that you made from South Sudan to South Africa, but it's also a metaphorical and a kind of a spiritual journey. But I want to start with the physical journey. You were born into a country that was beset by conflict, and yet you actually wrote that you had a fairly happy childhood, or at least aspects of it was fairly happy. So what was it that made you want to leave in the end?
Well, I think when you're young, all that you know is about your mother nest. Means whatever your life revolves around your mother. And at that time, because she could give me food, she can give me the basic needs that I need. And that made me as happy as a child. However, I think when the war broke out and we end going to the city, Juba, which is the capital city of South Sudan, and that was when we start experiencing a lot of hardship. And that hardship from the fact that I was a fatherless child and there was nobody else to support my mother, despite her having about 6 kids. So life was very difficult for us. And that's when we become a shared children, where we need to go to some of our uncles to be able to be looked after. And that's where the difficulty of my life as a child begins. And then from there, everything actually got worse and worse and worse until the predicament that I found myself in, and I end leaving the country under unusual circumstances.
Yeah. So your journey is an interesting one, because you kind of took a bit of a roundabout way to get to your final destination, but you went from country to country and then decided that you wanted to make your way to South Africa. And as a South African, I'm very curious about why you decided to come here of all places.
South Africa was not my intended destination. If I was going to be coming straight to South Africa, I could have just gone from Juba to Uganda, Burundi, Kigali, and to South Africa straight. It could have been much easier. However, at that time, I was running because I was in a Muslim school called Kalwa, and I was running from my captors. And that's when I ended finding myself in Eritrea. And after a few months living in Eritrea as a street child, wandering around the city, that's when I decided maybe I need to go to a country where I can offer me an education. And that's when I decided to take another journey through Ethiopia to Nairobi. However, my first trip didn't turn out well because I ended being arrested in Moyale, with the border city of Kenya, and being in prison for a few days. And then I was left destitute. And then I needed to go back again to Asmara to raise some more money. And then afterward, I end in Nairobi. And when I think that I arrived and I went to my uncle's house, and that's when I got disappointed that actually my uncle didn't want me in the house. And of course, what triggered me to come to South Africa was when I got a can of Coca-Cola and I saw made in South Africa. And out of anger, I decided I was going to go to South Africa. And that time I never thought about it. And I just decided I'm going to go to South Africa. And I really, really was not part of the plan. But, whatever the mind conceives, the soul will be able to get to the top of it.
Well, that kind of feeds into my next question, because along this journey, you faced many hardships. You already mentioned you were destitute. Sometimes you slept on the streets. You had to beg, try to raise money in different ways, little bits by little bits, so that you could do pieces of the journey along the way. But I want to know, what made it that you decided that you were just going to keep going? Because a lot of people would have thrown in the towel and said, no more, I'm just going to stay where I am. This is going to be my life now. What made you decide that you're just going to keep going?
People normally, when they give up, they're having other option. They're having plan A or B. In my case, I have nothing to. If I give up, where will I stay? Will I be able to get school? Will I be able to get job? The answer is no. I cannot give up in a place where everybody has already given up. So it didn't make sense for me. So I had nothing to lose to take another journey, but I have a lot to lose if I gave up. And I knew that my strength in life lying in education. That if I have an education, sort of education, I can become something. I knew that ability. Though my mother also told me that I was clever, but mothers are never good judges anyway, because mothers always think you are clever. But I did believe in her, that she believed in me, that I would become something better in my life if I had an education. And I think probably that's what triggered me, wanted to not giving up. And I really needed, because somewhere something in me feel me that I could become something important in my life. And that hope is what pushing me to move forward and forward and forward. And life, I think if you have faced a predicament in your life, we tend to make certain kind of decisions. One of them is that either you, after you encounter major incidents in your life, you have two options. One of them, you can feel helpless, that there's nothing you can do for yourself, the circumstance beyond your control. Or you could say, well, all that has happened means I've been unfortunate, but there's still something for me there, and you take a journey. And that was me. For me, I refuse to be helpless. It's not part of me. Helplessness is something that never crossed my mind. It will never be part of me. Neither being a victim. I will never want to be a victim, because again, if you become victim, you're saying that there's nothing you can do about your life. Your life control is under someone else's hands. And I refuse to submit into that notion in my life. And I always believe that my life, my success, my failure, it's all down to me and based on the decisions that I make. If I make the right decisions, I will prosper. If I make the wrong decisions, I will fail. And that's why I never blame anyone into my predicaments. I always take ownership of my problems. And that perhaps what makes me to be successful today.
Absolutely. And I mean, you were talking about education. So you finally arrive at your destination in South Africa. You come to Johannesburg finally, but your journey doesn't end there, because you want that education, but you don't have the means to do it. So how did you go about getting that education that you so desperately wanted?
Well, when I arrived Joburg, I think the first night I spent in the hotel, that was my last night, and took my last shower. And then the last 2 days, I didn't have a place to stay. Believe it or not, I spent 2 nights outside there, the Flying Bridge next to Elspark Stadium. And that's where I spent my 2 nights. And it was horrible. And when I spent the nights there were a lot of other street kids. But the difference was that those guys has arrived. They're living their dreams. For me, I was still in journey. So I just knew that though I was faced by a lot of unusual circumstances, I still knew that there was something out there for me. And I just knew that during any other journey, you'll face a lot of hardship. And that's what probably prompted me not to give up. And I end going looking for the Cambodian missionaries and festering with the question that they need to help me, they need to give me a place to stay. And that was a breakthrough. But again, when they took me to stay with them in 65 Highland Kensington, what was very important is that I remember that they asked me if I could do the gardening. And what I did it with absolutely 100% focus on it. And I did very well. I cut the corners nice, because I just knew that I need to make their decisions of kicking me out very difficult. They need to be able to think that this guy actually can work. And after they really were comfortable with me, that I was a very good worker. And what they asked me was if I could actually get a rental place next to them so that I can continue doing the gardening. But I told them, no, gardening is not, I love doing it, but I think I need to get an education. And that was quite a difficult, but I think because they get to admire my determination, my hard work, my life story, then they decide, okay, you know what, though you got no certificate, let's send you to the Board of Swaziland and see where they could get education there. And that, I think, was one of the major big break in my life.
So you did your matric, and then you get accepted for medicine at Medunsa, and you become a doctor. But there were even more challenges there as well, because when you got placed to do your community service, you got placed in a hospital where you experienced a lot of racism, for example. So how did you overcome that?
Yeah, okay, just I want to reverse back, because I wanted young people out there to understand. when I did my first matric was 1997. And I actually didn't pass well. My average marks was 57%. And I couldn't do medicine, neither engineering. So I was accepted, supposed to go to technical wits. And when I went to the dean, and I couldn't understand why I was supposed to be allowed to do engineering at Technicon, not at university. And that puzzles me. As a result, I refused to do the electrical engineering, and I went to repeat my trick again at JP High School for Boys. Okay, and that was my game changer. When I finished my matric at JP High School for Boys, thanks to Calvin Tate, who was the headmaster at that time, and he actually given me scholarship to study for free, because I keep pestering that I want to repeat my matric, I want to improve because I want to do a proper course. And that's when I went to university. But even after going to university, yes, in the history of South Africa, in 1994 at Calafong, there were a lot of challenging about, I don't know whether you call it racism, but also I think people of certain cultures in South Africa tend to be comfortable with each other as compared to outsiders. And that's apply means if you're Africans probably happy with an African colleague, but they might not be happy with an English or with Portuguese, let alone be Black or foreigners. So people tend to group together. And I find it quite very difficult. And of course, I have to fight and have to be determined in my pursuit of knowledge. And there was once that actually I almost resigned because of the difficulty that I have with my superiors, who think that they've been very unfair. And I didn't want it to be discriminated based on my color of my skin or based on my cultural difference. I want to be judged based on my academic results and what I can do for my patients. And I feel that they have been very unfair. And fortunate that one of the professor, Matiba, convinced me to actually carry on in my study. But life is a challenge wherever you go. There's nowhere where things are smooth sailing. And if everything, your life is a smooth sailing, chances are good that you might not be successful in your life. You might you might be misleading yourself. So challenges are there for us to make us a better person.